Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dubcast with Dubside. I'm Andrew Olazaga.
And I'm Dubside.
We passed the first year anniversary of the Dubcast.
Oh, that's right. We did. Wow.
When we started talking about doing this, it was partly because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
It wasn't possible for people to get together at Greenland kayaking events. So we thought that doing a podcast would be a good way to connect with people in the Greenland stock community through your stories, and also by gathering the different perspectives of people involved in the Greenland style movement.
Yeah. And I think I can say that we've somewhat achieved that. It's come out pretty good so far.
Yeah.
You know, I certainly appreciate all the people who've been listening and all the comments we've got. Even before the pandemic, I would meet people that lived out in the middle of nowhere, and they found this Greenland kayak thing that was really cool, but there was either one person or nobody else to really share it with, unless the one time a year they would travel to one of the events. So this they can listen to the podcast and that be somewhat connected in that way, I hope.
Mm-hmm. The feedback and the comments have been great. It's really been nice to share our passion for Greenland style kayaking with the people out there who are into it.
Yeah.
And a common theme in these stories is how people have progressed from complete ignorance to mastering these kayaking skills. Also getting to the point where they're experts that can share it with others. In this process, we are humbled by the ingenuity of the Inuit people in creating these techniques. Whether you're talking about skin on frame, kayak building, kayak rolling, harpoon throwing, or ropes gymnastics, it's remarkable as a response to the harsh conditions and the scarce resources they had to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And another common theme in this story is how human beings in general can be so quick to dismiss and reject what they don't understand, as the mainstream kayaking community and prominent coaches initially did with Greenland style.
Okay.
But the truth wins out at the end. You can't suppress a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm thinking of it was the last episode, the one before that, where Brian Schultz, you talked to him at length, and he said that after enough years doing this, it becomes to be all about the people. It doesn't matter about the gear or the techniques or the places you paddle or things like that. It's just the people you hang out with, and sharing a common interest in the passion of that. That's the main thing.
Yeah, the growth of Kayak USA and of Greenland style really shows the amazing things that can happen when very passionate and smart, creative people get together to support a common cause.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to keep the introduction to number 25 brief.
Okay, yeah.
And say happy first year anniversary, Dubside.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for supporting us.
One more thing, by the way, have you seen those Oru Folding Kayaks?
Yeah, looks like an artist portfolio when it's disassembled, and then you open it up and unfold it kind of, and then make it a kayak. Yeah.
When I first saw them, of course, I thought about you and your commando kayaking with folding kayaks. Initially, I didn't think that these would be as durable as your feathercraft, but they've come out with some new designs, including one that is designed for quote rugged expeditions in surf and wind, called the Coast XT. It's their expedition model, 16 feet 2 inches long, 25 inches beam, and 32 pounds. And they say that the assembly time for this is 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but you will be thrilled to know that Oru now makes their folding kayaks in black.
Oh, cool. I guess I got to get one now.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I first got my feathercraft, they were only in green, blue, red, or yellow. So I got the green, and eventually they made a black one, and they got that to me, and I used that. But the Oro, I hadn't even thought of that. But I've seen those Oro kayaks. I've paddled them a couple times. I think that the last event I was at, somebody brought one, one of their newer ones. But yeah, it's that whitish grayish white color is not as appealing to me. But If they make it black, yeah,
Yeah. So
I'll have to check into that further.
have you ever paddled one and rolled
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
It's the same as the some of the other like full boat and other ones. If you're going to roll them a lot, there's not a real watertight seam around the cockpit, so it's going to start
Okay.
to fill up with water relatively quickly. Whereas the feathercraft, the spray skirt would completely seal the relatively speaking, could seal the cockpit. You could roll far more times before it started to fill up with water.
Okay.
So they're not quite the rolling machine, but they're not bad.
Do you think that could be fixed with a better spray skirt?
No, not
Oh,
well. I have to look closer at the Oru kayak. The full boat ones from years back. The full boat was the company in Charleston. They started I think the 20s. They had a long history. They folded a couple within the last 5 or 10 years, unfortunately. But just the way you fasten the skin together underneath the cockpit, like there was a little, half-inch gap that wasn't really covered beyond the spray skirt. It was still out exposed, and so the water would just come in there. You can roll it once or twice, and it's not that bad. But you roll 10 or 20 rolls like we do in the Greenland stuff, and you're going to get full of water in the bottom.
yeah.
The full boat folks, I remember back at some point, they were coming out with new models here and there because they have such a long history. They have quite a number of models, and they used to make the wood frames out of wood, but then they'd gone to aluminum, and they had this new one. It was called the City Boat, CITI boat, and their goal was to keep it under $1,000, which they managed to do. It was tight, but so for get a folding kayak for under $1,000. And I went to the event in Charleston, and they were anxious for having me try it, and they wanted to see me try to roll it. So I rolled it. It rolled fine. I could do a hand roll on it, and then I found out that they didn't. That was to see if it could be rolled. And I thought, come on, don't you have any people on staff that can do a basic roll? Waiting for me to see if it'll roll, but I guess no, whatever. So I rolled it for him. It rolled fine.
Cool. Yeah, if you go on the Oru website, they have a series of some instructional videos, brief videos on paddling and self-rescue, and one on rolling. But I got to tell you, I was disappointed with their rolling video. They have a video of a guy in a pool doing like a C to C, and you know what it looks like when someone just barely gets up. It's
I
like
know
that.
it very well.
I was thinking, man, you would think they could find someone who would really know how to roll to demonstrate.
Yeah.
I had emailed them before about getting somebody who knows Greenland techniques to roll their kayak.
Yeah.
So maybe our listeners could help us reach out to Oru and say, we would love to try this Coast XT out and have a dub side show everyone how easy it is to roll, Greenland style. Maybe if our listeners could send them a message, let them know there's an entire paddling tradition out there that they could benefit from in terms of bringing rolling skills to a whole new level. What do you think?
Yeah. Now that they make one that's in my kind of color.
Absolutely,
yeah. I'm very interested.
Okay. Well, so without further ado, let's start the next Dubcast, number 25.
Right.
How I became head judge at the Greenland Games.
Welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. This is Dubcast number 25. I have attended the Greenland National Kayak Championships for many, many years, and I have, I suppose, exhibited enough competence and knowledge in the skills that I eventually served as one of the competition judges in Greenland. And in this Dubcast, I will tell you the details of how that came about. Also, I will tell you about a band that was probably as significant as Nanook, but in an earlier time era. And that is a group called Chili Friday. They were Maligac's favorite group, and they were active in the late 1990s, early 2000s. To tell you this story, I have to introduce 3 characters, all Greenlanders. And the first guy is Jens-Erik Amundsen. And Jens-Erik is an older guy, and he was involved in the inception of Kanakatufiat back in 1985. I believe he goes all the way back to the beginning. And he, and sometime later, became the president of Kanakatufiat. And then after he was the president, he was the secretary, and he was the treasurer, and was very involved, very dedicated, and very passionate about Greenland kayaking. Second guy's name is Niels Thomassen. And Niels got involved in kayaking somewhat later. He's a good deal younger than Jens-Erik. And he first competed in 2004, the same year I went. Niels is from Upernavik, a little village way up north of Disco Bay. By 2009, Niels had agreed to serve as president of Kanakatufiat, and Jens-Erik shifted over to secretary. And the third person in this story is a guy named Jon Pita, who's about the age of Niels, younger guy. Jon Pita started his involvement sometime maybe 1999, 2000 or so. He was one of the top-level competitors. His best rolling score was 255, and his top rope score was just under 400. In 2004, he stopped competing. He got very involved with judging. Evaluating the racing and the harpoon throwing is fairly straightforward, but the ropes and the rolling require that one be familiar with the various maneuvers involved and the proper way to do them to get points. In rolling, you can get full credit for a roll, or you can get a point off if it's not quite done to perfection, and the judge has to make that determination. In 2004, when Jens-Erik was still in charge, he had all the competition paperwork, and after I did the rolling event, I wanted to know what the breakdown was, because I thought I should have had a few more points than they'd given me. And I asked about it, and he just kind of... Jens-Erik isn't really fluent in English. He sort of hemmed and hawed and said, maybe later. And I said, I'll give you my address, and you can mail it to me. Please mail me the score sheet. And later on, when I asked competitors who had been there years before, they said, don't push it. You can ask once, maybe twice. After that, just let it go. And I never got the score sheet. And I later came to find out that score sheets are not given to competitors. You just don't get your score sheet. That's the way it is. After I'd been to the competition a number of times, I could see that it's a lot of work to run it. And in the days before all the competitors get there, aside from just setting up the accommodations, there are the race courses have to be laid out in the varying distances. There are the ropes. Place has to be set up. You might have to sink some posts into the ground. If they don't have enough rope, they have to go buy some more and cut it to length. The harpoon target, if the one from a year before didn't get there, then they have to make a new one, which is quite a process. And you've got all the score sheets to print up, and pens, clipboards, batteries for the megaphone, and the judging booths have to be put up in the right place. It's just a lot to consider. Rather than keep on coming and taking, as it were, I wanted to give back. So I said to Niels at the end of 2009, would you like it if I were to come early next year and I can help out with all the setup that has to be done? And Niels replied without any suggestion on my part. He said, we could use you to help with the judging. And I immediately said, well, I'm a foreigner. I mean, I don't want to cause any fuss. If I'm in the position of having to do the judging, I don't want to cause some controversy in that regard. So Niels said he would check with the guys, the other, probably Jens-Erik and the other people there. He said he would get back to me. And I went back to the U.S., and this is typical Greenland interaction. I never heard from him, never got the word, do I come early, do I not come early, what's going on? So I had been to Greenland enough time to sort of figure this was going to happen. So I booked an early flight. I got there maybe a week or so ahead of time. Well, that year it was in Nuuk, the big town. And Jens Sirach, even though he was the secretary or treasurer of Kanakatufiat underneath Niels as the president, but Jens Sirach he was going to be the person in charge of running the competition because he was the head of the local club. And then Jan Pita, who was also from Nuuk, he was going to be the head of the judging staff. And this allowed Niels to sort of step back and just officiate from afar. Well, Jens Sirach and Jan Pita seemed to welcome me with open arms. And they told me we have a judges meeting ahead of time. We can come to that. I did help set up the ropes area, which took more than one day. We had to dig holes in the very rocky Greenland ground. I've come to find that some years that things aren't quite as organized ahead of time, and some years they're better. And this year they had some pre-planning going on. So we have this meeting. And we start out, and they had maybe like 8 or 9 people there who were going to be the judges. And Jens Sirach and Jan Pita were sort of running the meeting. First thing they did was go around the room and everybody introduced themselves. Well, they had readily invited me to this meeting, but they had not seen fit to supply me with a translator. It was more just like sink or swim, Dubside. I'm sitting there, and I can see that it's going to come around to me, and I'll be on the spot. And actually, I can bring you back to that moment because I recorded it. So here's me faking my way through in front of an audience of Greenlanders.
Dubside Mick Atekapunga, you Kayak USA mit Utep Utokatsapunga Kar Ashlisut Iluamek as Okalu Sinangilanga Kisiani Misilibunga Koenok
Wamakata fluence iduriangyo idurisaningan ko nga kaya idurisamot.
All right, you can hear how comfortable the person after me is introducing herself. That is Margrethe from Kayak Ilulissat. So what I said was, I attempted to say, my name is Dubside. I'm with Kayak USA. I'm sorry. I do not speak Greenlandic, but I'm trying. And you can hear just faintly somebody say "Pikkoli," which means awesome, very good. They're happy that I'm trying to speak Greenlandic. And then I said, thank you, Koyonok. They start off the meeting by there's a document about 100 pages long. I've seen it before, which is all the rules of Kanakatufiat to run the competition, from the age divisions to the point values to how you set up the harpoon target, etc. And they proceeded to read the entire document, taking turns going around. They didn't have me try to read it, but and we sat there for all 100 pages read aloud. And I knew that much of what was going on, but then they started talking about other things, and I couldn't quite follow the conversation. But at some point, Jan Pita had divided up all the events in the age categories and was assigning people to judge. So this race, the teenage group. So you and you will judge that race, and then you and you will judge this race. And he had assigned everything. And then for the rolling and the ropes, he had me doing a lot of it because it does require some specialized knowledge to judge ropes and rolling, and they knew that I was familiar with those things. So we had assignments for everybody. And as the meeting continued, Jens Sirak, since he was running the whole competition, but the judging was Jan Peter's thing, so he wasn't there for the entire meetings. Later on in the day, just Jan Peter was there in charge. And Jan Peter, he could speak some English, so after we would take breaks and things, and he would talk to me in English, tell me what was going on. And the second day of the meeting, towards the end, Jens Sirak wasn't around, and Jan Peter goes into this, sounded like a rant. I didn't know what he was saying, but he was mad about something. And this goes on for a while, and then he ends the meeting. People leave. And I was on fairly good terms with him, but I was afraid that whatever he was mad about, where the uncharted territory here is that there's a foreigner on the judging staff, and if I'm part of the problem, that's a big concern to me. So we go out together, since he was cool with me before anyway. And then he explains to me that he's supposed to be in charge of the judging, and Jens Sirak is doing the rest of the competition. But Jens Sirak is, getting too much into his business, micromanaging him, and he's not happy about that. So I was relieved that the fuss here I wasn't the cause of it. So they start the competition, and I think the first day was the short distance race. Jan Peter's got the megaphone. He's counting them down to start. They count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Except they use the Danish numbers to count. So it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it was Ashlachiput. So we're starting. And the next day, there might have been another race, but at some point they stuck in the team rolling event. That's where you have teams of 3, and they all have to make the roll to get points. And there was only 3 or 4 teams to do, so that it wouldn't take very long. They could fit it in the same day as something else. And so we had the rolling area all laid out, and Jan Peter, usually you have somebody at the judging table and then an assistant who's writing down what he's functioning as a secretary. So I was the secretary, and Jan Peter was the actual judge. And I was noticing little peculiarities, like they have the paddling upside down for distance. You turn the kayak over and paddle as far as you can on one breath and come back up. And so Jan Peter, he's having, for the team, rather than have 3 people all line up and see, how far they can paddle. And I guess the shortest one, they would all get credit for that because they'd all made at least that far. But he's having them do it one at a time, and he adds up all the distances. So this guy did 3 meters, this guy did 6 meters, this guy did 5 meters, and he's adding 6 and 5 is 11 and 3 is 14. And I'm thinking, no, it was 3. They all did a minimum of 3, but he does it his way. They get credit for 11 meters rather than just 3 meters. The next day they were going to do ropes, and among the judging staff, there weren't that many people with real familiarity with the ropes, so my services were going to be utilized. And Jan Peter took us to the ropes area, and he had me. There was another guy named Imanarok. Imanarok he does ropes quite well. So he said, you and Imanarok are going to judge together. And he had us sit there at the table in the little booth, and he said, okay, Dubside, you sit here, and you do the judging, and Imanarok, you write down on the score sheet, which surprised me because I thought I would start out as a secretary, but Jan Peter had me, me making the decisions whether the person got points or not. Each competitor has half an hour, so this takes all day, and I really got in the groove. When Imanarok got tired, I said, okay, bring me another secretary, I'm going to keep on going. And some people had to take a lunch break, but I said, I don't need lunch. Let's go. Give me another secretary. I'm going to keep on judging. Just keep them coming. And this goes into the afternoon, and sometime after that, one of the other judge people came by, and they said, oh, Jan Peter quit. And I said, I didn't know quite what to make of that. He quit. What does that mean? when it got into the evening, it was decided we would stop for the day, even though we weren't finished the ropes. I don't think we had some of the men, the 20 to 34, the main competition group, hadn't done their ropes, but we didn't have time, so we just stopped. The next morning, I think it was maybe the long distance race, and the first race might have been the women or one of the adult categories. And so we all had a little impromptu meeting on the dock there in Nuuk. And I guess, Jan Peter was nowhere in sight. So the top competitors, I guess it was in their interest for the competition to continue. I mean, you couldn't cancel everything just because the head judge walked off. So Jens Rock was there, and they all looked at me and they said, "Okay, Dubside, you're the head judge now." And I said, "What? I can't even speak Greenlandic." And they said, "Doesn't matter. You have that position now. You're the head judge." A typical Greenlandic moment. Despite all your thoughts and expectations, you're thrust into a situation you're completely unprepared for, and it's time to just improvise and make it work. So to start the race, they gave me the megaphone, and I remembered the Danish words for counting backwards to 1 from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Astachiput. And the race started. Now, even though Jan Peter had walked off the job, he had set up the assignments for each different category and who was going to judge what. So we were kind of running on autopilot for the rest of the day, and it worked out all right. But the next morning, the individual rolling was scheduled. And without Jan Peter there was nobody on the judging staff with a full working knowledge of all the rolling maneuvers, except for me. So I got a bunch of blank score sheets and a list of people signed up to roll, and the megaphone, and the avatak, and the bricks and things. And one of the other judging people was going to assist me. And we went down to the water at the appointed time, and I judged the rolls, which meant that I had to announce the names of each maneuver. Unlike ropes, you just do what you do, and that there's a coach to help you. But in the rolling competition, they call out the names of the rolls in Greenlandic. Now, fortunately, I had learned these years ago, the names of all the rolls, but it was quite intimidating to announce them electronically loud enough for everybody to hear in front of a Greenlandic audience. So I'm there going to Inaka Chinook, Bashlu Chinook, and people seemed to tolerate it. Nobody was complaining that this guy didn't even know how to pronounce things properly. And I'd also learned the phrases. You say when you do it on the right side, to say, do you want to do the other side? So it's ishlu and ishlu, and then would you like to try it again? If I take a point off, or if you don't do it right, if you miss one, and then it's mislok kaseviuk. Yeah, there it is. Mislok kaseviuk. Do you want to try again? And this 2010, this was the second time that Helen Wilson came to the Greenland competition. And so, as it turned out, I judged her rolling. I actually judged her ropes as well. And when she finished later on, she came to me and said, "Dubside, can I have my score sheet?" And here I was with roles reversed from 2004 when I was trying to get my score sheet from Jensrock. And now I'm the judge, and Helen Wilson is asking me for her score sheet so she can see what roles I may have taken points off for. And I said, "Nope, you don't get your score sheet. This is the policy in Greenland." And I could see from the other side that it precludes a competitor, picking apart the results and disputing. I should have got points on this one or not on this one. If you don't have those details, you just can't argue about it. So the decision is final. And even when Helen was asking me, "What about this, the spine roll? Did you give me the full 3 points for that?" And I said, "Look, I just, judged everybody on the list. I can't even remember have no recollection of what I did for you. It's whatever I gave you is what you get. I learned how subjective the standards are. I mean, this is not the Olympics, and often you're just sitting there at the judging table and somebody does something and you can't stop and say, well, let me go ask and check and see what the standard is. Let's just, well, I'll give them the points or not give them the points, and you just have to make it work and get through it. Now, being a person who is quite concerned about punctuality, which is rather out of place in Greenland, I still was getting discouraged because we would fall off the schedule. They didn't finish the ropes a few days before that, and so we had to make up some of that. And I could see that we were going to, push the schedule up. And like as it happened before when I talked about Air Greenland, that episode, if they have to add a whole extra day onto the end of the competition, then it throws people's schedules off. So I was, now that I was on the judging staff, I had some say in trying to make things run on schedule or catch up if we fell behind. So I think this year they might have been doing the men's category first and then get to the women and kids or something like that. So we're doing harpoon throwing, and I was not involved in the judging. I wasn't assigned to that, or I'd done the different category earlier. So I had nothing to do. I was just hanging out. And I'm looking up the hill, and there's the ropes stations are up there, all set up. It hasn't been taken down. And realizing that we still have the men's category to finish the stuff we didn't complete that a few days before that. And I thought, we could actually multitask this operation here. I could go start in on finishing the ropes while the kids or the women are down here throwing harpoons. So I told somebody, go ask Jenserak, if it'd be okay if I could just do that. I swear I was the head judge, but I was still going to check with Jenserak. And so the word came back, says, yeah, go for it. So somebody else took me in a car, and we zoomed back to the club, and we got the stopwatches and clipboards and score sheets, and we put out the word that within half an hour the men would have to come up there and do their ropes competition. And this was in sort of middle of the afternoon or maybe late afternoon. So we did. We went up to there, and I sat down at the judging booth and had a secretary, and we started on the men, and they ran through them, and they each had half an hour. So it took a while, and some people came by to watch. People come and go. You're there for several hours. I think we ran to the cafeteria to get a dinner break, eat some food, and then came back. Still had some more people to go. And I really wanted to finish this because I could see we'd be back on schedule, on the posted schedule, if we finished the ropes and didn't have to make anything else up. And so, since I was the head judge, we stayed there. I think it was past midnight. This is Greenland. It didn't get dark, right? So we had sunlight. So we stayed past midnight, but we finished all the men and got the ropes all done and got ourselves back on schedule. So in general, the foreigner being a judge for the first time in Greenland went fairly smoothly, except for one incident, and that involves enough complicated details that I'll have to tell you about that in the next Dubcast episode. It involves, you remember Karen Marie Jensen, who I told you about, who I taught her how to roll, and she was doing hand rolls by the time 2009 ended. Well, this was the next year, and so I had to judge her in the rolling competition, and it didn't go quite as I hoped it would. The first time I went to Greenland, there was a band called Chili Friday in their heyday, and they have a fair amount of heavy metal influence in their music. And a few of their songs became hits in their day, and one of them is something of an anthem. It's called Galashlit Nunaput. If you look at a map of the world that's not too old, it'll say Galashlit Nunat, and then maybe in parentheses it'll say Greenland, or it'll say Greenland and in parentheses Galashlit Nunat. Galashlit Nunat is how they prefer their country to be called, and that translates to the Greenlanders, their land. So the song Galashlit Nunaput translates to our Greenland. So you could kind of think of this as the Greenlandic equivalent of Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. Playing heavy metal is not my specialty, but I've tried to approximate the sound somewhat to give you my version of Galashlit Nunaput. Here it is.
Silasuak Aliana Imasuak Sekorasa Sakine Kingo Simavai Tachani Titashdune Aliana nesabutit, kusana nesashdutit, ashlani nashlani kasinanatit, galashnik nunaput, galashnik nunaput. Ukiyu Taragami Kashlori Nangosh Dute Isikalu Akiso Kiala Tuapute Aliana nesabutit, kusana nesashdutit, ashlani nashlani kasinanatit, galashnik nunaput, galashnik nunaput. Makasinek tarangavit Kemakala nekush lutet Ungasit kaluash dutit Kamani tuaputet Aliana nesabutit, kusana nesashlutit, ashlani nashlani kasinanatit, galashnik nunaput, galashnik nunaput, galashnik nunaput. Galashnik nunaput, galashnik nunaput, galashnik nunaput.
Well, the band members of Chili Friday have gone on to other things. The lead singer Malik has put out a solo album or two. And he's also been involved, I think, directing some movies, feature films in Greenland. So he's moved on to those areas. The guitar player in Chili Friday has acted in a number of movies. And that would include the movie I've mentioned before, Kakat Alanguit, the movie that has the Nanook song in the soundtrack, Ingashlaina Lekagut. I think some of the Chili Friday CDs are no longer in print. You may not be able to find that particular song, Galashli Dunaput, that we just heard. But other Chili Friday CDs are still available at atlanticmusic.gl. Next time in episode 26, how about I'll finish off these stories about judging and tell you what happened with Karen Marie, so as not to keep you too long in suspense. But that'll be next time on the Dubcast with Dubside.